Over the next hour, we'll visit the jail in Cornwall, Ontario. A horrible place, home to executions and brutal punishment, still cast their malignant influence. And we'll go to Wilmington, North Carolina, to the St. James Cemetery, haunted by the spirit of a man who was buried alive. And to another cemetery in Kingston, Ontario, long since buried under a park, but where spirits still roam among the ghostly tombstones.
The old Cornwall Jail, now a museum, is one of Ontario's oldest public buildings, and one of its creepiest. Built in 1892, it housed not just felons, but the orphaned and mentally insane. In the 1960s, the bodies of 7 murderers were uncovered in forgotten graves in the courtyard. These are just some of the many souls who lived, suffered, and died within its walls. And it seems their spirits linger on today.
We went there on a visitation. We were getting a tour of the jail. And it was really actually kind of funny because we were joking about what the cells were like and what it would be like inside the cells. She actually locked me in one of the cells, which I didn't think was very funny.
This isn't funny, Carrie! Carrie, that's not funny! Carrie, come on, where are you? Carrie? Carrie? Carrie, where are you?
I ended up getting separated from my friend, and I ended up in this visiting area. I don't know, it was a really weird room. It was kind of creepy. I wanted to get the feeling of what the inmates felt, to see their family on the other side. The phone rings and I answered it, but there was a dead silence on the phone. And I heard my name called, so I turned and looked. There wasn't anybody there either. And then I heard my name again, but louder and more urgent. So I turned and looked, and again, nobody there. Then I felt a really, really cold hand just swipe across the back of my neck. It creeped me out so bad, I took off running. I was so freaked out. Then I stopped, and I turned around, and there was this man sitting on the stool. He had dark hair, and his eyes were very beady, and he was staring at me. He was staring at me as if he really knew me.
There are 3 phones in the guard's office. One leads to the police station, one to the fire station, and one directly out to the exercise yard. They've all been disconnected. I personally have been out in the exercise yard on 2 occasions with groups of people, and the phone has rang more than once. So, curious, I walked over to pick it up and there was a buzzing sound in it. Hung it up, picked it up again, and it was dead.
Nearly everyone who visits Cornwall Jail reports the feeling of strange presences lurking in the maze of corridors, cramped cells, and common living areas. Others have actually seen apparitions from the jail's brutal past. Spirits who seem to be trapped in this place by their evil deeds.
In the 1950s, a horrible crime dominated the headlines for almost a year. Peter Balcombe, an army sergeant from London, Ontario, brutally murdered his girlfriend. They had met through the army in Quebec City and were returning through Dundas County, where a fatal turn of events began to unfold. Marie-Anne Carrière was a former girlfriend. The two had just recently started dating again, but evidently, on this date, something went horribly wrong. The couple argued, and Marie-Anne left the car and started walking to the nearest town. Balcombe followed her and beat her to within an inch of her life, then pulled out a knife and finished her off, leaving her body to rot in a rural ditch. After a lengthy trial, Peter Balcombe was sentenced to hang for his despicable crime. He was the last person to take the somber path to death at Cornwall Jail. His spirit joined the many others whose bodies dropped lifeless from the gallows and were buried in the courtyard.
Tonight, we're located at the Cornwall Jail. We're down in the basement. Now, I would like to ask permission, whoever is with us tonight, to take videos and audios. We don't mean no disrespect. We don't mean no harm. Can you give us any sign at all? Any sign that you're present with us? If you just had a norm?
Yeah. Just right now at 2:10, I had an orb fly across the screen, the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. It was a fairly bright orb. And it was moving from top to bottom, so sort of on a diagonal.
Whoever is with us right now, please show us that you're here. Can you touch anyone in this room right now? Can you give us any sign, any physical sign that there's someone in this room? Who do we have? Please speak up. Who are you?
Oh, just pain. The pain was like something was like hitting me in the back of the head, and I felt like my arm was numb, like I didn't feel like it was cut off or something, like it was just painful, like ripped out.
We got a reading around her. EMF shows approximately 3.5. Do you know who it is, Donna? Okay.
Tell her to stop.
What is your name? Give me your hand. You know about the white light? Hey, Maria, come on. Jane, come here, come on. Okay, you guys, you know the white light? Surround us, okay? Surround us with the white light. Protect us with the white light. Surround us with the white light. Protect us with the white light. Surround us with the white light. Protect us with the white light. Just talk to them, Donna. Okay? You're the one that's in control. They don't mean no harm. This is just a way to communicate with you. Okay? You just have to talk to them. Tell them there's no pain. You don't want no pain. They don't mean to hurt you. It's just a way to communicate with you. You just have to ask who it is and why they're doing this to you. Okay?
I want to know why you guys are doing this to me. And was this the type of pain that you guys went through?
What I think that happened with her is during the 2 weeks ago we did an investigation here, I had an apparition of a guard that actually was in charge of this kitchen, and he was probably the one causing physical harm, which never happens, but she was actually feeling how the inmates were actually treated here in the kitchen.
The kitchen area is quite an interesting area because during the renovations to build that region, the excavators found 2 underground dungeons, if you wish to call them that. They were certainly very small square rooms, no windows, no way to get into them other than to drop someone from above, sort of dropping them into a hole in the ground. There was no record of them ever existing in the jail, and we could find no one who knew of them or had any knowledge of them. But yet there they were, they existed, and just by their sheer existence we could tell that they must have been used in the earlier days as some sort of a solitary confinement or a major punishment for any of the inmates. The Cornwall Jail was actually built in 1833, 1834, was opened in 1834. In the early days, it served as an insane asylum to a point, because there were many people who would bring children that they could no longer take care of who were mentally ill and leave them with the jail keeper to spend the rest of their days here. When the paranormal group were here investigating, they did hear children's voices up in the courtroom.
When we were in the courtroom, there was a lot of activity that we were getting, and it was like around 12 o'clock or around 1:30. We started hearing children playing around. And I asked my partner that's in my group, did you hear anything? And so I just wanted to make sure she heard the same thing as me. And she's like, I heard children playing around, like laughing. And there was a few children. So when the lady, Candy, that works here, said that she heard the same thing. So I started getting a cold feeling and I was freezing. And that's when I knew that there was something there.
At the same time, they felt that they had light footprints showing on the stairwell coming up to the courtroom from the jail itself. In one of their videotapes, they have a small apparition that very much looks like a young child, I think a boy, in fact. So it's not out of the possibility that there is a spirit of a young child here.
Our first investigation, I was sitting in cell block 3, and we had a camera positioned in the back of me, and I was sitting in a picnic table, and I was asking questions. And one of the questions that I asked is, do we have any children here? As I'm asking the questions, we work on infrared, so we don't use any kind of lights. And my light on my camcorder went on and off. So we thought people was playing a prank, so I asked the members, who's playing with the light? They says, no one. And at the end of the evening, the following day, we went home, and we actually seen on one of our cameras that in cell block 3, as I was asking the question, do we have any children here? We actually seen an apparition of a little boy coming out from a cell block, coming towards the camera, a matter of a second, and going back into his place. So we think that the little boy was the one that actually flickered the light on and off. If you compare different prisons in Ontario, this prison, what happened, which is very unusual, is they have a mixture of inmates, and especially people that were actually diagnosed mentally unstable. They will actually put someone who's mentally unstable with someone that was a petty thief. And I believe myself that there's actually undisclosed information, the amount of people that were actually brutally or physically hurt in the prison here.
During the late 1870s, a man by the name of Jim Sutherland was convicted of petty larceny and sent to Cornwall Jail. What he stole was never recorded, but his punishment was clearly documented. He was to endure a severe whipping for a period of an hour with the use of fine cord until his body be bloody. The hapless Jim Sutherland suffered further punishment at the hands of a cruel prison guard named Barnes, who taunted and beat him mercilessly. Sutherland would go missing for days, to show up more bruised and beaten and even more withdrawn. Jim Sutherland never made it out of Cornwall Jail. He died alone, in solitary confinement.
Another area of the jail that has had a fair bit of paranormal activity is the women's cell. It was built in the 60s, and I know that the paranormal group has on tape what appears to be a woman's voice whispering, "Lock it." Another area that has seen a fair bit of activity is the general population area. There was cells for 10 people up there, but in the last number of years, there were oftentimes double that number of prisoners up there, so it was very crowded. And reports are that there was a fair bit of violence up there. So there seems to be a lot of paranormal activity up there. We've had doors opening and closing, and that's where oftentimes the lights are on when we've turned them off.
We're going up to the courtroom to do an investigation into the paranormal activities that have been recorded in the jail. This is probably the one of the most active places in the whole jail. There's been sounds of chairs being dragged across the floor when no one was there to make the sounds. There's a original prisoner's box that we've heard opening and closing. So there's been a fair bit of activity up here. Why do you remain in the jail? Why are you still here? Someone, did you hear that thump? Did someone just make a thumping noise? It come from the other side of the room there. One thump.
Just right in this area, I felt like but right now actually I'm feeling it right now. There's like it's really drafty in here, like more than usual. I didn't get nothing on my camera, but I feel the energy, like there's something present here.
Right here, I do definitely feel a cold spot. And as I walked to the other side of the room, it got warmer. I don't know if it's a power of suggestion, but I'm feeling what Maria says she feels.
Another area of significant activity is the courtroom, a place where an individual's fate was decided. It was here, in the 1950s, that Henry Sagan's fate was sealed. Henry Sagan had a long list of previous convictions, but in 1954, his life of crime came to an end. He pulled into Leonard Hurd's garage, demanding the day's take. He riddled the owner with a spray of bullets before fleeing the scene. On the day of his execution, Henry Sagan sought the consolation of Father Rudolph Villeneuve. But with only an hour before his execution, the murderer collapsed at Father Villeneuve's feet, dead from a self-administered dose of poison.
Of all my experience, I've been in the paranormal field for 12 years. If I can tell you if there's paranormal activities, this is the place where it is. It's very active, where we can't even keep up the amount of sound and video that there is. There's solitary confinement, cell block 3, general population. I mean, there's no place where it's not active. And yes, this place is definitely haunted.
With a long history of enforced confinement, the Cornwall Jail is a breeding ground for paranormal activity. Visitors should listen for the sound of whispers and footsteps. If they're quick, they may even catch a glimpse of the ghosts who lurk in the shadows there.
St. James Graveyard is one of the oldest graveyards in Wilmington. They opened the ground here in 1744 for their first guest. And they have some very old headstones here, so old in fact that most of them have faded over time from erosion. However, some of the stories here have not faded away.
Well, it was late in the evening. My girlfriend and I were taking a shortcut home through the St. James Graveyard. And being a bit of a history buff, I always like to stop and read some of the inscriptions on the tombstones. I was reading a particular one when I heard a noise off to the right. I looked up and I saw a man. At first I thought he was a drunk, but he was too well dressed for that, and he had a fierceness in his eyes. He stumbled in front of one of the tombstones, and as we watched, he disappeared right in front of us. Curiosity got the better of me. I crept up to the tomb, trying to read the inscription, but it was far too faded. Later on, I was to hear the story of Samuel Jocelyn, and I became convinced that he was who I saw that night in the St. James graveyard.
Graveyards are places where you expect to find hauntings. But we hope our loved ones find peace in the afterlife. For one poor unfortunate soul, this was not the case. His name is Samuel Jocelyn, and he's buried at St. James Episcopal Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is his story.
Well, I was taking Willie for his normal nightly walk, and it started to get pretty chilly out, so I decided to take a shortcut through the St. James Cemetery. Willie must have sensed something or heard something. He broke loose from me and ran to a mausoleum and started digging and scratching. When I got up to him, he leaned over to pick him up. I could have sworn I heard scratching. So I leaned down closer. I know I heard somebody say, "Help me, help me." So I just picked up Willie and ran as fast as I could out of there.
Now, one of the interesting stories goes back to 1810. A young man by the name of Samuel Jocelyn was born here in Wilmington. And Samuel Jocelyn was an interesting character in that when he was very young, he had a good friend by the name of Alexander Hostler. And Samuel and Alexander had a strange fascination with the afterlife. They took it very seriously.
And thus it's all over for our friend the Pond. Or is it? You know, if only everything were so simple as if we could just get to the other side of the board, we all get to come back as a noble.
That's assuming there is an end.
This is true.
In fact, the two of them made a pact that if either of them should die, they would come back from death and make their presence known to the survivor.
I suggest to you this. Whichever one of us passes away first, comes back to the other, and gives him a message to that one still living. So if I pass away first, I make a pact that I'll come back and I'll give you some sort of sign. What do you think?
You think that's possible?
I think anything's possible if we put our minds to it.
Got yourself a deal. Bishop takes horse.
And when Samuel was in his young 20s, just 9 months after being married, he had a tragic accident while riding his horse, and he died. After the burial, Alexander was sitting in his room alone, grieving over the loss of his best friend, when suddenly before him appeared an image of Samuel. Samuel's image emerged from the candlelit shadows of the room and whispered,
Alexander, dig up my body, dig up my grave.
He was terrified, unsure what was occurring. At first, he thought it was just a hallucination. He hadn't slept in days since Samuel was first found unconscious. He thought perhaps it was a natural part of the grieving process. He had never grieved like this for anyone before. He thought it was everything but the ghost of Samuel. And then on the second night, he heard Samuel's voice in his room.
Alexander.
And again on the third night. And after the third occurrence, he realized he needed to speak with someone about this. So that next morning after the third occurrence, he met with a friend of his, a gentleman by the name of Louis Toomer, who was also friends with the late Samuel.
I know it was him. Perhaps this has something to do with the pact you made. Maybe we should go dig him up.
And so the two came up with a plan, and that was very quietly, without telling another soul, they were going to return to St. James Graveyard after midnight that night, and they were going to dig up the body of Samuel. And when they opened the coffin, there they found the body of Samuel Jocelyn, upside down in his coffin, a sign that indeed he had been buried alive. Now, rigor mortis had already set in, but as they looked at the body, they saw the fingers, and the fingers were bloodied and shredded from where he tried to claw his way out of that coffin. Shortly after that occurred here, and this did occur in other parts of the world, this is before embalming, it became a practice here at St. James as well as elsewhere to be buried with a string tied to your finger. The string would run out of your coffin and be attached to a headstone of your neighbor's, to a bell specifically. This way, if you were accidentally buried alive, you could pull that string and ring that bell, and someone might hear it and come to your rescue. This is where the phrases "saved by the bell," "dead ringer," and "the graveyard shift" all came about.
Have you ever wondered why caskets have a curved lid? It's actually because in the beginning they were built flat like a box, flat on both sides. But unfortunately, many people were accidentally buried upside downwards. Because of this, we had to change the construction and curve the lids. St. James Graveyard is certainly a favorite stop on our tour. Many times when I'm here telling the story of Samuel Jocelyn, at the same point in my story, the lights will flicker on and off for no apparent reason, and only during that same part of the story. Others have experienced seeing dark, shadowy figures of someone walking back in the right corner.
Well, some of my friends talked me into going on a guided tour at a church graveyard over in Wilmington. Well, when we got there, I knew I was in trouble because, man, that was the scariest place I've ever been in my life.
Now, I do these tours with the Ghost Walk. I come to that cemetery on a regular basis, nightly. One time I came inside the cemetery. I got everybody settled in, started telling the story.
Welcome to St. James Cemetery, ladies and gentlemen. An old Southern cemetery dating back to the 1700s. The story you're about to hear is called Buried Alive. A fate worse than death. Takes you back to the year 1810.
And then, immediately behind my right ear, I heard a voice. I said, "Do you hear this? You hear this?" Saying it to the crowd. And this one guy's going, "It's over there, it's over there." Well, I heard something back here. He's saying it's over there.
And I looked over to my right, over my shoulder light, and I saw one person, and they were moving around between the tombstones and all. And I said something to the tour guide about it, but he was listening to something from behind him over there. And I showed him where it was, and he got to looking at it.
Next thing I know, he's pointing me in this direction. I'm looking over there, and there's this eerie figure, this figure in black, moving across that cemetery. And I said, "Let's hit it, let's go." And I was out of there.
And we both got scared, and we grabbed everybody and just started running. I was scared to death, and so was he. So that was quite an experience for me.
I'm not gonna be intermingling with these creatures. I'm just gonna document it and go. And that's what happened that night. I don't run. I did run once. Hope to never run again. That night got me.
Kingston, Ontario is one of Canada's oldest and most beautiful cities. It was once the nation's capital and still has an elegance that befits a capital city. It boasts gracious century homes and tree-lined streets. But behind the gentle facade, the city also has its secrets. This sunny park hides a tragic history.
Well, we'd been in the house for about 3 years. My baby was 3 months old, and I was downstairs in the living room. My husband was out for the night. I decided I finally had a moment to sit back and relax, so I picked up a book and started to read, and then I heard the baby moving on the baby monitor. And then all of a sudden, I heard a voice. It was a woman's voice with a thick Irish accent. And I got alarmed. I was shocked. So I ran upstairs to the baby's room, but as I got to the door, it slammed in my face. So I grabbed the handle, and it opened a little bit, and I started pushing on it, but there was something pushing against it, and I couldn't get in. All of a sudden, the door just swung open, it finally let go, and I ran into the room to make sure that my daughter was okay, and I looked around and there was nobody in there. So I checked to make sure that my daughter was okay. She was sound asleep and peaceful. So I looked around the room a little bit, and then I noticed that the window was open. So I thought, well, maybe it was the wind from the window that had slammed the door shut. So I went over to close it, but I realized that it wasn't really a breezy night. So I shut the window, and as I'm standing up, I see this reflection in the mirror, and it's this woman. She was wearing something out of the 1800s, and she had the shawl draped over her head, and she was almost disheveled. She was very sad, and she almost looked ill. As I turned around, there was no one standing there. I looked around the room a little bit more, and I was a little creeped out, so I went, and the first thing on my mind was get my daughter and get her out of there, and got out of the room. Later on, I found out what the story of this area was. It's nicknamed Skeleton Park, and many bodies were buried there, so the fact that, you know, the way she was dressed, and it makes sense. I almost feel as if she heard my baby crying and was there to comfort her in a way.
On the surface, Kingston's McBurney Park seems like any other neighborhood park. But below the surface, this park holds a macabre secret. It was once a cemetery, home to 10,000 poor souls, most of whom were Irish immigrants who fled the potato famine only to die in a faraway land. It is believed that the ghosts that haunt this park today are the ghosts of these people whose graves were disturbed.
I'm Jeff. We're here at Skeleton Park in Kingston. Basically what we're doing here is I was here in July, and I was intrigued by the history of this location being a playground, as you can see in the background, and it used to be a cemetery, which walking around you could see the stones in the ground still actually coming to the surface. And basically what we're doing here tonight is we're going to do an investigation. What we're going to do, first of all, we're going to do a walk around to find hot spots of this location. Basically what I got here is I got a night vision camera, infrared, which I have it on right now. This here is a booster, which allows me to shoot from 10 feet to 100 feet. And I have a 35mm camera, which I can shoot simultaneously with my digital camera. So if anything comes up on the video, I can also get it on the other two pieces of equipment as well.
Elizabeth is waiting to talk to us. Okay. She found me way over there, called me over to there, and said that she would talk to us when we got to the bench. She's looking for her daughter. Long blonde hair. She's wearing a light bluish dress. She's obviously not got a lot of money. And her daughter would be about 4 years old. She passed and left her daughter behind. She knows she's passed on, but she's still looking to rejoin with her daughter on the other side, and thinks for some reason, I mean, I think Elizabeth was buried here. She showed me around the other side where she was. She thinks if she stays around here, she'll find her daughter.
Kingston's McBurney Park is known to many residents as Skeleton Park for a pretty good reason. It was originally a cemetery, one of Kingston's earliest and largest cemeteries, that started use in 1809 and basically filled up, particularly through the 1840s, with cholera and typhus epidemics that swept through Kingston. Became a very full cemetery, and by 1893 was completely full and a complete mess. And at that time, the City Council decided to turn the cemetery into a city park. And it is a city park even now today.
Well, a few years ago, when my husband and I first moved into this house across the street from the park, everything was great at the beginning. And then one day I was standing at the window looking out at the park, and this mist came out of nowhere into the park. And I swear I saw some tombstones in the mist. Now, at first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. And I sort of dismissed it. I thought, well, you know, maybe I was imagining things. Mist comes in off the lake. We live close by the lake. So I kind of dismissed it. And then a couple of weeks later, my husband and I were walking back through the park, having been to this great party, and we were laughing and having a good time. And then the mist came again. Only this time it was all around us, and it was really thick and cold. And we stopped, both of us, to look. And then there in the middle of all this mist were these tombstones. And walking in between the tombstones were people. And they seemed to be wearing long, old-fashioned clothes. And a lot of them looked really ill. But the whole situation really scared us. So we both, without saying anything, we just turned around to leave and started running away. And we got to the edge of the park, and I don't know what made us, but we both stopped to look back. And the mist and the tombstones were gone. Ever since then, I can't go in that park, even in daytime, even when it's really sunny. I get a very cold, clammy feeling when I'm in that park.
Again, it's like that feeling like it's dipping in a Yeah, there was a pit here. They were just dumped in.
Yeah. This is another spot. The sadness I feel, though, it's almost as if I don't believe that when some of them were buried, they weren't all dead.
Yeah.
Buried alive?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
They said they were dead enough.
Dead enough, okay. 'Cause yeah, that's all I heard was I'm kind of hearing like the crying out of the moans or something. Like they weren't dead when they went down there. Not all of them were, anyway.
Well, when they converted the old cemetery, the old burial ground, into a city park, they made a number of decisions, and one was that they weren't able to move all of the bodies, and people could pay to have their relatives moved, but otherwise the bodies were left here. And so today historians estimate that there may be as many as 10,000 bodies buried here. Now, they also discovered some really unusual things when they were excavating, and also even in recent times when people have been running sewer lines or doing other things underground in the area. They've come across some interesting things. They have found mass graves. I know that they found one mass grave that had 11 bodies in the same grave site. That may be because of the cholera and typhus epidemics of the 1840s. At that time, people were dying very quickly, so they didn't have time to do full burials of everybody. They also believe that those diseases, at the time they believed that those diseases were airborne and that they would still be contagious, so they wanted to get the bodies underground very quickly, and that may be the reason for some of the mass graves that were found. They also found empty coffins and empty graves, and that is likely indicative of the grave robbings that used to happen in Kingston. Grave robbing was a pretty popular industry in Kingston in the late 1800s, and particularly because medical students had to provide their own cadavers to use in their classes. They weren't provided for them. There weren't too many legal ways they could get bodies, and so most of them turned to either going and getting bodies themselves or paying grave robbers to do it for them, and we believe that that was the fate for many of the bodies here in Skeleton Park.
I live in the area. My father grew up here in the 50s. They used to ride their bike around here and looking for bones. I know it sounds terrible now, but to kids, skeletons and macabre things are fun. I think they used to play ball with some of the skulls they found, and other people took the bones and decorated on their bicycles.
Well, my friend and I here, we go to university in this area, and we rented a place beside Skeleton Park. And we didn't realize the place was haunted until we moved in, and then we started seeing some really weird things going on. You know, when we'd get home from school, doors would be open.
Lights would be turned on. It was just all this kind of unexplainable events that were going on. It was just really weird, but we didn't think anything like too much of it.
I had a dream one night, and in this dream, I walked into my kitchen, getting myself a cup of coffee. I got my cup ready and my cream, and there was a man standing there, and he was angry. I don't know exactly what he was saying. He had a very thick accent, but it sounded like, "Get out of the house." And, you know, I tried to get away from him, but he grabbed me and choked me, and started choking me to the ground. And then all of a sudden I woke up, and I heard coughing from the other room. So I went into the room.
And it turns out I was having the exact same dream. I was in the kitchen, and the same man with the same thick accent had come and tried to choke me. He was telling me to get out of the house. The dream was so real. It felt like I couldn't escape. It was almost like I was going to die in my dream. He wanted to kill me in my sleep. Well, later we actually found out that our house had been built on an old graveyard. So that explains all the spirits and all the freaky things that we've been experiencing. I mean, this is where they're resting and we're invading their space. So it makes perfect sense. It's just scary.
Oh, that's definitely a stone right there.
See, somebody's just digging it up.
That's definitely a stone. No question.
It should be digging up the stones.
Yeah,
It's wrong.
look, it's got the name on it. N-O.
Oh, it is too.
N-O. What, Michelle?
I just keep hearing soldier, soldier, soldier. Private.
This looks like a Nolan or something. P. Nolan.
Private Nolan.
Private Nolan.
Mm-hmm. He's my soldier. He's the guy that's been showing himself to me. Because he's got the gun. There's a gun coming off the back area.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a gun. It's something sticking up the back. There's something wrong with the back of his head. I think he was, he's got blood all over the back of his head.
I'm getting right here, the back, his back, right there.
Okay, maybe that.
Blood?
Yeah, blood, yeah. He died very tragically.
This one morning, I was really rushed to get to school, and I was downstairs just getting a few things organized, and as I was going upstairs to get my backpack, I stopped on the bottom stair and looked up, and there were these two people standing there, two figures, and they looked really sick and very sad. I just stared and turned around and bolted out of the house because I was so frightened. I didn't know what to do, so I had to go and wait outside the house for a while.
One late night, I was trying to get to my friend's house, and I had never been there before, but they told me that the landmark to look for their house was the park, because they lived just near to the park. So I couldn't find the park, but I did find a graveyard, and this is what I thought they meant as in the park, the graveyard. So I went through the graveyard, and there was this feeling, this uncomfortable, unsettling feeling that it just made me feel, well, not welcome. And I felt like there was maybe someone behind me or something. But the next morning, I came back the same way to come home, and I went through the park, but there was no tombstones. There was no graveyard. It's bizarre.
We are trying to communicate with the spirit John, the spirit who has been giving me signs all day and all evening. We ask for this particular spirit to come through and communicate with us. He's sad. He's very sad over the destruction and over the multiple souls that he feels have been lost. He's saying you have no idea. I don't know what he means by that. Anybody else picking up what he means by that?
The horror of what went on here. They were just digging holes and dumping them all together.
Something's touching the top of my head. I don't know who's behind me. It's like it's playing with the back of my hair. That's how strong it is. I can feel it. And it's not the wind. Because it's not it's in a pattern. 27. I don't know what that means, the number 27.
McBurney Park is a beautiful place to spend an afternoon when you're in Kingston, Ontario. But at night, the restless souls of the dead, who were buried so unceremoniously and then forgotten, can be seen roaming the grounds, unable to rest in peace.